Hello, beloved, and welcome to this episode of the Ascension Cafe. Do you believe in magic? It's so interesting that I'm actually recording this episode on spring equinox. And the reason I'm saying that is today is the symbolism, isn't it, of new beginnings, of spring, the beginning of spring, that wonderful, amazing time of year where Mother Earth literally bursts into life. Lambs are born if you live in England or Wales or Scotland or Ireland, right across the UK. This is lambing season. We also see lots of baby hares and rabbits, foxes, cubs. It's a time of birth and new beginnings. But there is a real magic in the air this time of year. This time of year is just, for me personally, is so exciting. As I sit here in my sacred space, recording today's episode, I have the sun flooding in my window. Sky is blue, and I can see the buds on the trees. And I often reflect upon Mother Earth's seasons and how they reflect our journey, our spiritual path, our journey. There is a time for rest, just like winter. There's a time for birth, for new beginnings, just like spring. There is this time for celebration, for everything blossoming into its fullest and highest, just like summer. And then there is a time to step back and allow all to recede and to fall away, ready to rest again in the winter, just like autumn. Our spiritual path, when we awaken, when we first wake up, that is like coming out of the winter, out of the darkness, and into that spring, into that new beginning, where we start to see things very differently. There is colour all of a sudden all around us as we step into nature. And much is the same on our spiritual path. Everything becomes abundant and colourful. For many souls on their spiritual path, as we awaken, we also awaken to other possibilities. For some, at the very beginning of our journey, it may be a very internal process. It could be literally that beginning to understand who we truly are and to unfold and release all the things about us that aren't true. But more often or not, that comes a little bit later on our spiritual path. For the vast majority of us that are already awake and have been on our journey for some time, often or not, that awakening, that spring of our becoming, we start to see things that almost feel incredible or impossible because we've been so conditioned to fear the unknown, to fear what we cannot physically touch and see, and also what we cannot scientifically prove. We have lived for many centuries through the logical, egoic mind. But this planetary ascension that is happening right now, as our vibration raises individually, but collectively it raises too across the whole globe. The veil between the different realms is thinning. And right now, during these potent energies of the spring equinox, and these will be around, I am of the understanding, right to the end of April, the veil between different dimensions and realms is almost non-existent. So all of those things we were taught to fear as children, growing up via different institutions, whatever they are, governmental, religion, education, schools, even our peers, our parents, our friends. All of those things we were taught to see, to fear or to believe were nonsense. They were myths, they were legends, they were fantasy, start to become our reality. And I want to share a little bit with you about some of my earlier experiences and even some more later experiences. But first, I just want to talk about the realms that even when we're spiritually awake, we may feel uncomfortable to talk about or to even explore in private. And these are the realms of the fairies, the dragons, the angels, the unicorns, the elves, all things magical and mystical. On my path, I am extremely blessed. One of my guides is Merlin. Merlin represents the fairy realms, the realms of the dragons, the unicorns. And he represents nature, the magic within nature, the beings that may be unseen but are there. For a long time, I struggled with that concept. I struggled with the fact that these things that we were told were fairy tales or folklore or myth, they were real energetic beings that absolutely are playing a huge role in planetary ascension. They're not fantastical. They're not just something of our imagination. And I pose this question to you now, and I ask you to just really reflect on this. What if our imagination is actually soul remembrance? Just think about that for a few moments. Where does where our imagination come from? Is it complete fabrication, or is it a spark of wisdom and inner knowing that we hold deep within us? But what really if, in this age that is turning and shifting from the heavily focused, logical, egoic mind to the heart, what if it isn't actually about proving whether these beings exist or not in a physical sense? What if this is about us really stepping into our multidimensional self? The realization that this world, that the universe, that all that is far more than we have ever been taught to believe that it is. What if this is really about that unity, that oneness, that law of one, and understanding that we are connected to everything, whether that is physical or whether they are pure energy beings of light. So back to my earlier experiences, I want to share with you. And the reason I feel really guided to share these with you is I really hope that today's conversation really empowers you to explore the soul calling to connect not only with spirit or our angels, which is becoming much more acceptable on planet Earth in the collective, even amongst the curious and the unawakened, there is a bubbling curiosity. But what if it is more about you really truly being given the permission to connect with so many aspects of your soul that you have hidden so far or not been able to access so far. But now, with the level and the vibration that we are at collectively and individually, we can actually communicate and connect with many different beings. So take that invitation into your heart, beloved. And as I share my experiences, some of them may resonate with you, or some of them may just trigger an inner knowing within you and empower you to explore too. So very early on in my ascension path, I had the most beautiful experience. I was actually folding and putting away washing in our bedroom. My husband's wardrobe was right next to the window, which overlooked the countryside in front of the beautiful little lodge house we lived in at that time. And boy, was that place magical or mystical. Wow, it really was. As I was putting away some of my husband's t-shirts and jumpers, I looked across the field in front of the house. We had had torrential rain, really heavy torrential rain. It was February. Sorry, no, it was later than that. I think it was about April time. April time, 2020. I was looking across the flooded field. The sun was shining, and the water upon the field was glistening. So even though the field was waterlogged, it looked quite magical. It was sparkling and glistening. And as I looked to the woods beyond the field, everything started to transform and turn blue. I was blinking and rubbing my eyes, thinking, what is wrong with my eyes? And then a beautiful silhouette, a shape started to form amongst the trees, and it became very vivid blue. And as I was squinting and looking across the glistening water on the fields towards the woods, I could make out the silhouette of what looked like an angelic being, and it was the most vibrant cobalt blue. I was just in awe. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move, I was frozen. I don't even think I blinked, and I blink so much. I don't even think I blinked. I was just staring. And then I heard within my mind, in the most beautiful, what felt like a male voice, say to me, share forward with others, teach others about the angelic realm. I literally just, my knees went from under me and I just sat on the bed and tears were flowing. They were pouring from my eyes. And once I'd managed to gather myself together and stand up, everything had resumed back to the way it was before. The sky was blue, but the trees and the waterlogged field had returned back to their natural state. It was a mind-blowing, beautiful experience, and that was the beginning of me stepping into my role fully as a spiritual space holder, a teacher, a wisdom teacher. Let me fast track forward quite some time. I was on an amazing retreat in Malaga, in Spain, with Mia Kafkios and the group of women who I had completed the Therapist of the New World training with. This was back in end of August, early September 2022. We had had a profound and beautiful day, a very expansive day. There had been some amazing sessions. The connection we had made with one another was just beautiful, and we were spending the evening sat in the garden of the villa that myself and 5 others of the sisters were actually staying in. It had gone dark, and as we sat in the dark garden, we were all supping chamomile tea, and we were looking at the stars and listening to the sea. The garden overlooked the coast. It was just beautiful. I was sat with my sister and a very dear friend. And as we looked up to the stars, my crown chakra was pulsating. It was almost painful. And I said, "Can you feel that?" My sister said, "Yes." Her and our friend said, "Yes." And then I looked back up and I could see something moving in the sky that looked like sacred geometry. It was shifting and moving. It was darting about, but within a range, quite small range of the sky. And it would change different shapes, all kinds of it was going from a triangle to a dodecahedron to almost like a star, like the pentagon star. It was mind-blowing. It was crystalline white. And I said to my sister and friend, look, can you see that? And they both saw it too. And then we said to the other 3 sisters sat in the garden chatting, "Look up, look." And they also saw it. And we were just mesmerized again. That night we went to bed to sleep, and I was quite unsettled. I was tossing and turning, and I could almost feel my body vibrating. And I drifted off into a very restless sleep. And then I had a vision. It wasn't a dream, it was a vision. I could sense and feel who I believe was Commander Ashtar stood to my right. And I was looking into this abyss, this huge black hole. And there was countless, hundreds of thousands of people walking like they were brainwashed, they were hypnotized, and they were just walking aimlessly towards this huge black hole. And I was screaming and shouting at the top of my voice, "Come back, come back, come back." And I was shouting to God, "Help me." And then I felt who I believed was Commander Ashtar's hand on my shoulder and him gently whisper in my ear, "It is your calling, beloved. It is your calling to bring them back from the darkness and into the light." And I was blown away. I was completely blown away. Fast track a further 2 years on. Now to September 2024. Sorry, October 2024, because it was the school holidays. My husband was on holiday from work. We had gone, I'd felt a calling, a very strong calling, and I'd even been given beautiful guidance that it was extremely important I went to Tintagel Castle and to St Nectan's Glen. And at Tintagel Castle, I would connect with a guide, and at St Nectan's Glen, I would connect with Merlin. So, as always, following the guidance, on the first day, we were down in Cornwall. I visited Tintagel Castle. And as we got to the mount, and I stood on top of it, where the statue of King Arthur is, I burst out into tears and I couldn't stop. They were silent tears. I wasn't making any sound, but these tears were flowing so fast. My heart felt ripped open. That's the only way I can describe it. And I stood looking at the statue of King Arthur, and just for that split second, he was there and he was looking right at me. Just for that split second. And even though I didn't move, because once again, I was completely frozen as I was when I had the experience of who I believe was Archangel Michael in the field, the waterlogged field, and the experience of seeing some kind of galactic spaceship in Malaga, I was completely frozen once again, stood here in Tintagel Castle on the mound, looking at the statue. The very next day, we got up early and we travelled across to St Nectan's Glen. Our beautiful Brooklyn at that stage was 10 years old and she had arthritis and her mobility was starting to deteriorate. And after climbing all the steps and the long walk we took to get to Tintagel Castle, she was really quite stiff. So my husband said to me, I'll wait here in the car and you make your way over to St Nectan's Glen. It's important you go. You mustn't miss this. So I did. I kind of went a really weird route, but managed to find St Nectan's Glen. I paid entry, as you do, and made my way to there's several smaller fountains, but waterfalls, but I made my way to the main waterfall. And it's really quite magical. It's lovely. There's logs for you to sit on. They have bunting and flags and ribbons that people have tied into the tree, making wishes to the fairies. I sat there just quietly on my own and I just closed my eyes, breathed in the air, listened to the waterfall, and put my feet into the water. And I must have been sat there, I don't know, maybe 5, 10 minutes. And then I could hear some children laughing and splashing about. And I became aware that actually I'd been joined by quite a sizable group. It looked like a couple of families maybe away on holiday together or sharing a day out. The children were loving the water. And even though it was October, it was actually really warm. It was a beautiful day. I turned and looked back to this huge tree that had all of these hundreds of colourful ribbons hung in it. And as I did, I saw something right in front of my face. And I blinked a few times. I thought at first it was like a fly. And then I realised it really wasn't a fly. This was no fly. This was a fairy being. I had very little understanding or knowledge of fairies, and it moved in quick darts. That's the only way. It kind of shifted quickly across my eye line, and then it just disappeared. I quickly drew, quite crudely, drew a picture of this beautiful being I had just witnessed with my physical eyes on my phone, on the notes page. And I just asked, And I said, Lord Merlin, are you here? Is this why you wanted me to come? Did you want to kind of wake me up to this realm that I hadn't really explored before? And there was no audience messages, which is unusual for me because I do get a lot of audience. But there was a deep inner knowing, and my body tingled from head to toe. It literally tingled all over. And I almost heard a laugh. And I knew that was Merlin because he always brings in this joyous, fun energy. I mean, he is serious sometimes, but this was fun. And I just knew that this was an awakening to the fairy realm. I was very blessed to be able to reach out to a dear friend who has a very strong connection to the fairy realm. And she was able to confirm to me that indeed it was an air fairy. And being there, connecting with the elemental energies of the water, the sun, the earth, and even a gentle breeze on that day, the air, this beautiful air fairy had come because it was time and I was ready to acknowledge these divine beings. And as fantastical as all of this sounds, these are just some of the amazing experience I've been blessed. And I do believe that part of these experiences, because my role as a wisdom teacher is also to demystify the magical, to help others to expand their belief system, to expand their mind beyond all of the control, the conditioning that each and every one of us have experienced lifetime after lifetime. It is to help others to realize that whatever you sense, see, feel in your meditations or in your day-to-day life that may seem almost impossible is absolutely possible. And you're not going mad. You're not going crazy. You're just going through different awakenings to different dimensions, realities, and realms. And it is a beautiful blessing. So, beloveds, I invite you to sit with this. Take what resonates with you and leave the rest behind. And trust that everything that you experience is always divinely meant for you. Try and release any fear and know that you are always divinely held, supported, and protected. And that when you have experiences that may seem almost fantastical or like you're going crazy, you're really not. You're just raising your vibration and you are able to connect with what was hidden or obscured from you before. Please do pop along to carrieknot.com, and Carrie is spelled C-A-R-R-I-E. Knot is Knott.com. Have a read of the blog because I do share on there some reflective prompts that will really help you to navigate, really connect to me in what you believe in. You know, what feels completely out there for you, but you know deep in your heart is sacred truth. And it is just pushing beyond that logical egoic mind into the realms of the heart, where you know what you are experiencing is true. And also, I invite you to join me in the Ascension Cafe community. Right now, it is completely free to join. There will be a link on this blog and podcast where you can join. Here, once a month, I will be holding sacred space for a workshop. And I will also be popping on doing live transmissions as and when I am guided to within that sacred space. I hope you have the most beautiful week ahead, and may you walk through your week with love, compassion, and clarity. It is love and blessings from me, Carrie Knott, in the Ascension Cafe. Until next time, beloveds. Until next time.